Warning! This review will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode by now, I advise you do so before watching this video. If you decide against this advice, however, you waive the right to inquire about legal recourse in regards to your hurt feelings, because it's all your fault. Also, if you spoil future episodes in the comment section, a fate worse than death will be coming your way. They actually made a follow-up to Hard to Say Anything. Good lord. I know exactly how this is gonna go, and I'm pretty sure you guys know too. I mean, I could be proven wrong, but what is the likelihood of that happening? Regardless, let's just get on with this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pones N Stuff. Do you guys remember at the end of my school days review when I said the writers, showrunners, et al. Had started listening to us and giving us what we wanted? Well, I'm pretty sure that no one asked for this. A sequel to the worst episode of last season, because either I'm in a fever dream or the world has gotten fed up with all this crazy stuff going on, but decided to eat itself from the inside by giving us this crackpot of an idea as its first horseman of the apocalypse. I know these statements I am making are extremely overreactive, but I have the right to be fearful, because if you're taking something as bad as the plot of Hard to Say Anything, twisting it ever so slightly, and then putting it into a new shell, hoping that it would do something different, you're being so optimistic that, I'm not sure that I can believe in it. And it makes me even more anxious than I already am. But when I look at what this episode could do, with Nick Confalone, an experienced writer at the helm here, it could actually turn out alright. I mean, he could do, to this episode, what happened with Uncommon Bomb by making the parent map out of its ashes, filling up all the holes that it had, allowing it to float and sail down the stream of critical analysis with not much of a problem. While that is indeed the dream, I have to look at the episode to see if it manages to, and that's going to be a little more difficult than I realise. However, I can thankfully say from the get-go that Mr. Confalone tried his damnedest and reaped some rewards, even though the aura of the past was still overshadowing it regardless of that. Hard to Say Anything committed the exact same cardinal sin that non-compete clause last week's episode did, by sticking a middle finger up at the existing continuity and morals the show had already put in place. However, that does not stop me from saying that Breakup Breakdown is no saint, because it didn't support the latter point, with a frank acknowledgement that a message and themes surrounding communication had already been done to death on this show. There seemed to be little hope on the horizon for it, if that's the assumption I'm getting to straight away. But it worked out rather well, because the characters, not just the main couple, but the supporting cast as well, managed to benefit from it regardless. By putting Sugar Belle and Big Mac's relationship into new territory, it allowed the big, burly apple pony to realise that the communication moral that has been feigned by so many episodes of the past made him look surprisingly well-rounded, and it built into his backstory to where realising he actually needed to talk more, which actually goes against what had been put in place. He had, of course, when Where the Apple Lies, realised that he had to shut up to stop getting into trouble. He acknowledged that in this episode, sought to make amends, and now, going forward, I am pretty certain we're going to hear the Big Mac talk more, which means we're going to see a lot more verbal dexterity from Peter New's incredible vocal chops, who, just like this episode, as he's probably going to do in many down the line, give him some much needed personality. Here, he wept, sobbed and smiled. He was smitten and serious, all while making you laugh and feel unbelievably sorry for him, even when Discord had warped him into making bad decisions. Now, speaking of Spike's relationship with said Dragon Equus, it's still testy at best, but they still share some unbelievable banter and some chemistry that really impresses. I mean, hell, you don't just go around and just take a slight jab at the fact that fluttercord may actually be a thing. Spike, you are incredible. And it proves they've come a long way from what Dungeons and Discord set up. especially for the Lord of Chaos, who showed he has a heart under the facade of pomp and frenetic ceremony outside of Fluttershy's company. The Cutie Mark Crusaders have also progressed, from trying to help their teacher and Big Mac himself try to get some pony booty, good lord I'm going to regret saying that, to albeit accidentally confronting their growing maturity by wanting a special sun pony of their own to call. You know, instead of looking for cutie marks, that is a humongous jump up. All of this works out quite nicely as the incredibly powerful and diverse voice acting and clean, responsible and nuanced writing of these characters are treated with the utmost care and attention to detail to ensure it's a home run. Except for the haphazard nature that caused this entire episode and this set of characters and Sugar Belle to come together. That's a bit flawed and misguided. Also, to stir the pot just a little bit more, was this all an elaborate plan that Discord set up due to being pissed off at not getting to play Ogres and Oubliettes? Because it seems like it was the case. I mean, he had a change of heart realising the sorrow it had caused people, but if Derpy was in on it, I would be mighty impressed. Seriously, these thoughts go through my head when analysing these episodes, and you know what? I wouldn't put it past Discord in the slightest. Either way, if you discount Sugar Belle, Apple Bloom and Scootaloo's non-entity performances, as well as Mrs. Cake too I may add, you'd have a surefire success in the character department. While on the story front, sure we have a setup whose execution resembles that of a Rorschach test that you cannot decipher within any good reason, it managed to overlap and facilitate 3 individual plots and have them come together without being jarring, which managed to keep its pace consistently stable and surprisingly fluid as Spike and Discord's foray into Ponyville love, the CMC's search for it, and Big Mac's bungled attempt to proclaim it ensured that this would not be a boring episode of the Friendship is Magic show, with narrative structure bending and twisting to its whims to ensure that the conflicts branched and interconnected into each other without a fuss being made. That being said, you could have easily removed the CMC subplot entirely and made it run a lot smoother than it did at the end of the day, because it seemed like there was too much going on. It just felt a little out of place, but they had to be included in the finale of this Big Mac love trilogy somehow, right? On top of that, the lack of thematic and moral weight holding it down was problematic, as overly dense drama replaced the carefree comedy that preceded it, dooming the second act to the mire even though it served a damn purpose in the first place, which wasn't helped by self-aware foreshadowing and nods to the said morals that reminded me of the glaring mistake that this episode made similarly to that of the parent map. It was exuding so much confidence that I don't think the writers were quite aware how much damage their decisions were doing to it. This episode is a good one in terms of keeping you invested. I'll give Confalone some credit. However, by pumping the narrative to the gills to the point of bursting, kicking the moral when it was down despite its obvious benefits, and buttering up the audience for their attentiveness, I cannot take this episode seriously 100% of the time. Which is problematic considering the serious subject matter that it runs with at its heart. I'm sorry, but I understand that they were trying to be really smart, but it didn't work here. And it undermines all of the hard work that this episode had put in to try and make itself worth the time, and it still is. It just means that it ashamedly lost points when it really shouldn't have, and I'm not very happy about that. However, the aura of confidence that I alluded to should have bled into stylistic elements, right? They should have made up for those failings wholeheartedly. You know what? They managed to, albeit with a small bit of egg to be found on its face. Having Discord as a member of the starring cast ensured that we were bound to see an aloof array of costumes, settings and musical spontaneity to fit exactly with how his character is portrayed, adding a sprinkling of insanity to proceedings. Sadly, the air of confidence that I just noted, which was quite high in me realising this, slowly ebbed swept away thanks to the realization that a lot of the aforementioned places and attires were being recycled from dungeons and discords. Now sure, we did get new things to fawn over. The clown outfit, the chef outfit, and the CRT TV audio and visual effects that went along with it. Oh my god, that was so incredible. I nearly had a heart attack of joy. Skeletor was a thing, Derpy's male pony uniform was adorable, Big Mac had the most incredible, overly exuberant and stunning facial expressions any character has ever been given, which explains where the laughter I alluded to earlier came from, as well as the incredible slow-mo love struck and that broken heart visual that we got, as well as the sheer variety in locations we visited and the occasional visual gag to go along with it. To see a small minority sour the good vibes that all of that gave me is not something I like to see, but it happened regardless, and I had to dock points, much to my annoyance. But this is what happens. I don't like it when things are reused. Put some creativity into it. You have Discord there, but what he did outside of that, along with the rest of the characters in tow, was pretty damn good regardless. And for the music, well, it seemed to suffer from the opposite, as the scale of different styles, tempos and tones made it a joy for the ears, from the clown music, the sad montage pieces, jazzy, sleuthy bar music, to the fun medieval bounties that we got before, along with sudden shocks and measured repose, all coming through. It had everything. If only it managed to survive across the whole episode in potency, we'd have been on for a winner, as it would have been a 5 out of 5 instead of retracting minimal points as a result. So, it's very obvious to see, despite a few flaws, much like the rest of this episode, sans the moral standing, obviously, this episode has done pretty well. But again, thanks to the parent map and premonitions I had already going in, I'm still left somewhat dissatisfied. I have to be painfully honest here. I could have easily just taken the thoughts that I summarized at the end of the parent map review and reused them again here, because both of these episodes seemingly made the same blueprint for each other and made pretty much the exact same errors, albeit with a few tweaks. It made it look like these two were separated at commissioning birth in the DHX offices, and that is quite an incredible thing to say at this point in the show's run, as I don't think this has actually happened before. The good thing is, there is a noticeable difference between them, because this episode had a much higher wall to climb than its brethren, meaning my disappointment for it is not going to be as clawing, which is a good thing in the long run. And to prove that point, Hard to Say Anything scored a 3 out of 25, which is easily better, more so, than the parent map was to the 5 out of 25 that Uncommon Bond scored, which means I can have a massive smile on my face that even the lowest expectations were exceeded, as it successfully did what I asked of it. It gave the relationship of Big Mac and Sugar Belle some much needed foundation and ability to maneuver. It made the story be able to carry itself and not be weighed down too much by what it was doing. It made the characters enjoyable and make me laugh and feel for them, not want to incite violence against them. And outside of a decent replacement musical number, I'd say I've gotten all I wanted from an episode that wanted to rebuild Hard to Say Anything from ground zero up to the lofty heights we see here. However, I am still slightly frustrated, thanks to Confalone's desire to be smart for us, the brony and analyst audience, who will notice the digs at the usual moral formula and the making of this story unfolding with an impossible series of improbable events, as it detracted from what was provided to us and dragged it further down than I anticipated. Was it entertaining? Sure. Did it still give me an anxiety attack while watching it unfold? You bet your ass it did. Did it manage to tie up all its loose ends of everything to make me smile? By God it did. With style. So that means not much of this was truly worth hating on, but those infractions have taken an enjoyable yet heartfelt episode into a territory that I personally believe it should not be in, because even Discord suffered here. And okay, that has happened from time to time, notably, but this is one of his better performances in a role where he wasn't handling it all himself. It wasn't all about him, and even he had problems here. That is indeed a bad thing to say. Thankfully though, this episode supported itself graciously enough to where it could successfully sail into my good books, albeit with a rating that I have to give out by proxy that might not reflect that. In all fairness, was this better than the parent map? Only stylistically, as it was morally outmatched. The writing, voice acting, and story, however, they were the same nails being hit with the wrong end of an eerily familiar hammer. Now, if that's not a coincidence, I do not know what is. Overall, the Breakup Breakdown scored a total of 16 out of 25, which is a B-. In closing, I am surprised beyond all belief that 2 episodes managed to plagiarize each other to the point that they both got the exact same rating. It's ridiculous, and it's something I don't think will ever happen again, especially with 2 episodes from the same season. The thing is, though, it's made me realize that I went into this so negatively that it usurped all expectations and basically made me look like a right fool. Because yes, I was going to give it a death sentence for a perceived lack of originality and creativity, but what it did was throw all of his accusations right back into my mouth hole and straight back into my digestive system. Because look at what we had here. A fun, pretty good episode that surprised on more levels than I was expecting. On top of that, it also got above the marker that I set at the end of last week's review. I wanted this episode to get a 10 or above, and it did. And as you can tell, I'm smiling from ear to ear. Now, you're probably saying to me, why the hell weren't you like that for the parent map? It was the exact same thing. But like I said, my disappointment is not going to be as much because this one had no expectations. And look where it ended up. I mean, it should have done some more original work anyway, but I'll give Confalone some credit. He did exactly what I didn't think was possible. And I'm not wearing a hat right now, but I'll tip it imaginarily to you, sir. I am just hoping, though, that you don't realise this is a formula that can repair other things, because I'll start to notice it, and I won't be as pleasant as I am today. Now, I have a little announcement to make here. I'm not going to be in for Pones N Stuff next week, because I'm going down to Brighton to visit my brother and then go to Comic-Con. So by the time I get back, I am going to be out of it, meaning Pones N Stuff is not going to come to fruition on time. So you're going to have to wait until the release of Marks for Effort to be able to see where I end up putting my analysis hammer into the ground. Let's hope that that episode does as well as this one does, because if it manages to, the happiness and the smiles and the joy will continue to come from me. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what you want, because that means the season is doing a damn fine job. But let's wait and see with bated breath. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching, this has been another edition of Pones N Stuff for the CC Network, and I will see you all next time.